Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Left Book Club conversation. We're really happy to have you here tonight for a very important conversation between Safoora Zargar, Mayur Suresh, and Adrija Dey, who will explore the ongoing challenges to freedom in a nation. The Indian state claims to be the world's largest democracy, and therefore which concerns us all. My name is Elif, and I manage the program of discussions, dialogue, and other events for the Left Book Club and support the Left Book Club community to connect with each other and start reading groups. Before we begin, let me tell you a little bit about who we are and what we do. As a non-profit subscription book club, we specialize in publishing collectible editions of radical books that are only available to our members. Our main focus is on promoting collective learning and political education, which we try and achieve by providing spaces for people to come together, exchange ideas, and explore new ways of thinking. Our aim is to foster a sense of community to support practical steps towards change. Left Book Club events have featured some really incredible speakers. So after this event, feel free to check out the video library on our YouTube channel for discussions engaging with a wide range of radical thought. And don't forget to ask your questions on the YouTube live stream chat. If you would like to become a member of the Left Book Club, please visit leftbookclub.com and click the join button to explore our membership options. Don't forget to follow the Left Book Club on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook to keep up to date with our work and discussions like this. Subscribe to the YouTube channel while you're watching us tonight. And this has never happened in any of our events before, but if the stream does go choppy, please stay with us and we'll make sure to continue running as soon as possible. So today, as I said, we have Mayur Suresh, Safoora Zargar, and Adrija Dey in conversation. Mayur Suresh is a senior lecturer and also practiced law in Delhi. Safoora Zargar is a researcher, activist, and student leader. She was wrongfully incarcerated by the Indian state for protesting against the Citizenship Amendment Act. And Adrija Dey is a research fellow, a campaigner against sexual misconduct in higher education, and a political activist organizing with Peace in India, an anti-capitalist and anti-fascist group that is organizing around some of the matters that we'll be discussing today. So without further ado, I want to pass on to Adrija to start the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aleph. And before I begin, I really want to thank Left Book Club for providing us the platform and the opportunity to have the discussion today. And I also want to say that Arundhati sends her best wishes and solidarity for this discussion. Before I pass on to Safoora and Mayur, I think for our viewers today who don't know a lot about what is happening in India, I just wanted to do a very quick introduction. So in 2014, the right-wing Bharatiya Janata Party, or BJP, came into power in India, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. So the BJP is the political wing of a larger umbrella organization called RSS, which is a right-wing Hindutva nationalist volunteer paramilitary organization that has shown open support for figures such as Hitler and Mussolini. Since they came into power in 2014, the BJP has overseen the specific targeting of Muslims and Dalits. Muslim houses have been demolished using bulldozers, very much emulating Israel's settler colonial tactics. We've seen violent police attacks, false police complaints, mob vigilantism. We've also seen political activists, student leaders, intellectuals being targeted for speaking out against the government or their agenda. But it is also important to kind of point out that this is part of a more, persistent trends in the Indian state's history. So since independence, the Indian state has criminalized dissent, oppressed people of Kashmir, overseen the inhuman economic and social structures that brutalizes Dalits, women, minorities, and the poor. The UAPA law, which is actually used against Arundhati, which we will discuss in more details later, was actually introduced by the Congress, the main electoral opposition to the BJP right now. But despite these long histories, there is a definite escalation under the ruling far-right government. We've done very short introductions to Mayur and Safoora, but as we start this conversation, both of you, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourselves, your work, but also more importantly, if you could tell us a little bit, like a few lines about your own experiences or connections with the UAPA and the larger sedition laws in India. Mayur, why don't we start with you and then we can pass on to Safoora.
Sure. And thanks, Adrija and Safoora, for inviting this conversation, and thanks to the Left Book Club as well. Um, so I guess my formal designation, to put it that way, is I teach at SOAS, School of Oriental and African Study, teach law there. My research mainly contemporarily focuses on anti-terror laws and kind of experiences of people going through terrorism cases where the same law that Arundhati Roy is charged under in Delhi's courts. Before that, I worked with lawyers in Delhi, as Elif said. I was involved. I helped the lawyer who was defending an organization called the Students Islamic Movement of India, it was banned as a terrorist organization in 2001, just after 9/11. And at that point of time, it was the previous avatar of the present government. So the BJP who had just come into power in 1999. There was 9/11 happened in 2001, then the Parliament Act case. And really, the Students Islamic Movement of India was the only big Islamic organization left standing up to the BJP. And at that point of time, they were banned. And so they've been banned repeatedly in 2001, 2003, 2005, and then again 2008. And that's when me and this lawyer called Jawahar Raja came and I was assisting him. And we won the ban for a total of, I think, about 12 hours. But before we overturned the ban for a total of 12 hours before it was overturned by the Supreme Court. But that kind of really opened my eyes to the ways in which the UAPA is an insidious kind of Frankenstein monster of a law. It seeps into everyday life. It makes basic ideas criminal. It targets certain sections of the population. And I'm sure we can talk about that later on. So that's me.
Safoora?
First of all, thank you for having us here. Glad to be in such fine company, Adrija, Mayur. And of course, to the Left Book Club as well. I I think a lot of people would know about me. I was, as a student activist, we were always, advocating for the release of political prisoners until in 2020, I became a political prisoner myself. The Citizenship Amendment Act protests in India highlighted, the sort of discontent that is there against the government in India, and the government sort of chose to, suppress the voices of people. I mean, the protest as well, and also with this opportunity to, completely erase the civic space and the space for dissent in India. And I was one of one one of the I was scapegoated, so to say, in the process, and I was charged under UAPA. I spent 74 days in pre-trial incarceration in Tihar, in one of the most strictest COVID lockdowns, I think, around the world. And I was finally given bail, after 2.5 months, because only on humanitarian grounds, because of my pregnancy, because my case garnered a lot of international attention, and I think that is what forced the Indian state to concede my bail on humanitarian grounds. I continue to be out, but I must emphasize that, there are 18 of us charged under in the Delhi Rats conspiracy case. and only 6 of us have managed to secure bail till now. And 12 of us continue to remain incarcerated in Tihar since the last 4 years. And, many prominent names among them, Omar Khalid, the Miran Haider, students, activists, and till now, they haven't been able to, we haven't been able to secure bail for them. And Omar's bail remained pending in front of the Supreme Court for 6 months. And that says a lot about the India that, we are living in today. In terms of work, as Mayur said, since he was doing the cases, he got to know the lived realities of the UAPA case. And of course, I live that every day. And I think that in itself is a lot of work. It has crippled a lot of aspects of my life. I also, my university canceled my admission. I could not complete my MPhil. I was not allowed to submit my thesis. And I'm a young mother, and I'm focusing on that right now. Yeah, Adrija.
Thank you so much for sharing, Safoora, and it'll be really good for us to go into some of the things that both of you actually mentioned in this first bit. But I'm going to go back to Mayur a little bit to kind of trace the history of this law, and maybe then we can come to the present and think about the future a little bit as well. But you've worked on this for a while, Mayur, and I was wondering if you could give us a little bit of like a short history of where this comes from and how it kind of acts as an instrument of suppression, but also like who is targeted the most using laws like the UAPA in India.
Thanks, Adrija. So when I use the word Frankenstein monster, I kind of meant that more, well, not literally clearly, but as a way of thinking about the two parts of the UAPA that currently exist. So there's two parts of the UAPA. One is one that targets associations and what they call unlawful activity, and the other part is something that targets what is called the vague thing of terrorism, right? So the first part, that's the part that kind of deals with unlawful association and unlawful activities. You can kind of directly trace this lineage to a colonial law called the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 1908. And this was a law used by the colonial state to crack down on associations, right? You from trade unions to the RSS to Congress Party to youth clubs, anyone that was perceived to be anti-state or where anti-state or anti-colonial state ideas could be organized or spread, those were banned. And it was something done by the local district magistrates. So the local district magistrates could say, there's a football club down the road from me. They are clearly training or disseminating ideas of anti-revolutionary ideas. We must shut this down, and that would be banned, right? And so, under the Criminal Law Amendment Act of 1908, people could be arrested for being members of the association, right? And the accounts of the association were frozen. All kind of resources were taken away from it. This law, incidentally, the same law was used by the Congress government upon independence. It was used primarily to target the Maoist party in the South or communist parties of the South and elsewhere. And so the law was actually struck down as unconstitutional. The Criminal Law Amendment Act 1908 was struck down as unconstitutional just soon after independence, as violating kind of fundamental right of freedom of association. Interestingly, it had a zombie life because India has one period called the emergency from 1975 onwards, but has been under several periods of emergency thereafter. So under emergency regulations, even though law was declared unconstitutional, it was resurrected, right? It had a zombie thing, right? And towards the period of the end of the second emergency, the then Congress government introduced kind of there was a scare around, and so China, the war with China had just occurred. There was this panic created around separatism from the South, separatism from the Northeast. So they created the Unlawful Activities Act to prevent that, right? To specifically target the separatism of the southern parties, of the northeastern parties, and that criminalized one of the sections that Arundhati Roy is under is for section 13, of that I think she's under from the media reports at least, which basically says any person trying to incite disaffection against India or any part that India should be separate or separate into different nations. And it's interesting because this act of the unlawful association is very similar to the sedition law, right? So the words of disaffection, feeling ill will towards India, right? So it's very similar to a sedition law. So it's really like this, it's this viral Frankenstein. I'm sorry, I'm mixing metaphors over here, but it's kind of entered in the UAPA. The second part of the UAPA, which is kind of the slightly more egregious, or the much more egregious one, is the terrorism part of it, right? So terrorism in Indian law wasn't defined until the 1980s. But before that, it became like this moniker in the colonial period for anything to deem anti-state, right? So even though the British had kind of quaintly scary laws called the Terrorist Outrages Act, the word terrorism was never defined. It was this vague idea, right? And scholars like Joseph McQuaid, for example, argue that this idea of terrorism was to designate any activity that could be perceived as anti-state. And that's kind of the legacy you see currently in how terrorism is framed. Whoever does any act by any means whatsoever to bring about fear in the minds of people, right? And so that's kind of the language of terrorism, because it could be anything. Like, what isn't terrorism then? And that's clearly what we've seen from cases. For example, putting up a poster, that is considered a terrorist act. Making a speech, that is considered terrorist act. Allegedly being a member of a trade union, that could be a terrorist act, right? And we see people who have been picked up under this law for all sorts of things. So, for example, when we're doing the case against the Student Islamic Movement of India, people will be picked up for random stuff, like for possessing literature, right? For allegedly saying that, or for example, protesting the burning of the Quran, that was seen as a terrorist act, as an unlawful act, right? And so it's because the word terrorism is so broad, it could mean anything that could be potentially seen as threatening or fear-inducing. That is effectively what terrorism is. So when we say terrorism in India, there are the acts of mass violence. We can't deny that. People do bomb civilians. People do have shootouts, and there's no doubt about that. But at the same time, the other aspect of it is this, that people are being charged for terrorist offenses, for possessing literature, for possessing so for example, Omar Khayyam, for example, something that many 20-year-old angsty 20-year-old people will have, that is seen as possessing terrorist literature because of the name, right? And there are cases like that people have possessed, for example, Das Kapital. You can allegedly be a member of a terrorist organization if you possess Das Kapital, right? And so that's how it's being used. It's kind of creeping into kind of what we call kind of civic life and freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of association, who I think, but it's also kind of creeping into like everyday life in a way. It's insidious. The fact that someone could make a terrorist allegation against you is something that for some populations at least is quite a threatening thing, right? There's one case that I found where, for example, there was a land dispute, right? And one of the people in the land dispute tipped off the police or paid the police and said, "Oh, this person's a terrorist," and it got him involved in that case for a very long time. And the fact, and kind of one of the insidious things about the anti-terror laws is that it's, as Safoora knows through her lived experience, is that first of all, I mean, courts are willing to give leeway because you say terrorism and judges get a bit like, oh, just step back a bit, national security, etc. But then the text of the law itself, right? It allows, for example, extended periods of custody. It allows for well, not endless, but you can be in under the UAPA, instead of 15 days under what was ordinary procedure, which I'm sure we'll get to in a second, right? You could be in police custody for 30 days. You could be in pre-trial custody for up to 6 months, right? And it's virtually impossible to get bail. I think Safoora is very lucky to get out on bail, and that's kind of the fact that most of her, the people organizing around the anti-CA protest still in jail shows that you have to basically prove your innocence to be out on bail, which is not the purpose of bail at all. So you could be in jail through my fieldwork, I've met people who are in jail for 14 years pending trial, and then finally acquitted. Right? And so the aim of the law is not to punish terrorism. The aim of the law is to keep people who the state thinks as anti-state in jail for as long as possible.
Thank you, Mayur. And I think this is a really important thing that you mentioned about the vagueness as well. And I think a lot of people in UK, especially who are campaigning around like policing and criminalisation, which is happening in the UK, will be familiar with that because in the PCSC Act, which has come in, it has like similar vagueness, but also like whatever, like like Gargi Bhattacharya and others write, like a lot of the policing and securitization which is coming back are all laws which have been tried and tested in the colonies, and then they are kind of making its appearance under the regimes now. And we'll talk more about it in a second, but like I'm going to pass it on to Safoora and to kind of talk a little bit more about like, from your experience, like, who are the people who are being targeted by it, but also to kind of talk about the effects of the UAPA within, your communities and within the student communities, intellectual communities.
I think, Mayur really covered almost all aspects of it, but, just to like point out a few things, like, as per the NCRB data 2020, the Muslim community accounts only 14.2% of India's population, but they are disproportionately, represented in Indian jails, like 19% of them. So, I mean, this is not just under UAP, but under various, laws. And it can be attributed to number of things, lack of access to good legal representation, and various other factors. But the fact remains that this is the situation, and I feel, and also the data shows that minorities, minority communities, specific communities remain, the targets of disproportionate targets of, all of these laws, not just the UAPA, but I would also say the NSA or, all of these laws. So in terms of, how I experienced UAPA, first of all, this whole idea around, another name for UAPA is an anti-terror law, right? So whenever you utter the word terrorism, everything sort of becomes really huge, and I mean, even in jail, if you would tell somebody that you're kiss mein aaye ho, to murder mein, I mean, have you come under murder or half murder, and then you will tell them that I am under UAPA, and suddenly you'll be all isolated, even inside an isolated space, And I mean, in the women's jail, in the men's jail, of course, like people know about the UAPA, but in the women's jail, there were very few prisoners under the UAPA, and mostly they were Kashmiri prisoners. So they would be like, oh, these people are anti-India, So even inside prison, you become sort of like a criminal. So again, like your life inside prison becomes extremely difficult. I mean, whatever facilities will be available to other inmates will not be so easily available to you. You will go through extra scrutiny at every process. Your letters will reach you very late. For example, when I was arrested, I was kept in solitary confinement for 15 days. I mean, and this is not just like a case in point. This is a pattern with every arrest under UAPA. The arrest is hyped so much, and there is, it's made to look like such a serious, like, it's related to terrorism, and this person is a serious terrorist, and that sort of a thing. And so the jail authorities also behave with you in a certain way. I was in solitary confinement for 15 days, and I kept asking them that, why have you kept me in isolation, I would not receive any response from anybody. I think during that solitary confinement, I wrote around 10 letters to the jail superintendent, to like various authorities, to DG. I don't even know whether, they were passed on or whatever, what happened to them. There's so much of extra scrutiny. I was not even allowed a phone call home to inform my family that, I have been arrested and I'm in this jail. Leave alone the fact that I am entitled to legal representation. I am entitled to a call to my lawyer at least. My lawyer was not informed in which jail I was being taken. You're arrested, they will come with, a battalion to your house, and, they will just like pick you up, and they will not tell them, they will just, they will be wearing all of these scarves over their mouths to cover them. And it's just the representation of it, that whole play is made in a way to intimidate you to an extent that nobody even can come out and try to help you. Everybody around you is scared, this is like the end of everything sort of situation. So that's sort of, the play around the act, how it is executed on the ground. I mean, it is so difficult to, I mean, of course, we read it and we read about it and we point out the loopholes in the law, and of course, but to experience it, I think it is also important to talk about how it is played out in real life. The one person from you've been picked up from your home without, you would never call for investigation, just picked up from your home, police raids your house, and in front of the whole neighborhood, you're sort of like paraded like that and taken out. I mean, I think that is where sort of it's there for the entire life. I mean, I got bail, of course, but there's so many people who are not getting bail. But even after 10 years, when they will come out on bail, that image has not left, the minds of people around them. So you're constantly associated and you're fit into this specific image of being a terrorist, whether you're acquitted or whether you're convicted. It's not going to make much of a difference on your personal life, that sort of thing. Because of course, you're also spending so much of time in pre-trial, detention, 10 years. I mean, I met women in jail who were like, since they're in 20 years, and their trial was not progressing. So I mean, there was this woman who got convicted after she was acquitted after 22 years, and we just went and said, you thank God, you're gonna go out. And she's like, I don't want to go out. What will I do outside? I have nobody, especially with women, they're mostly abandoned by their families. So she's like, I don't want to go. I don't know what I will do with my life. At least I get food here. So it's that sort of situation. And the how this entire we also need to understand that these laws are created to feed a certain narrative, and to fit into that narrative, they need to be played out in a certain way, in a certain fashion. And that is what makes life extremely difficult for those who are accused under the law. It tilts the whole principle of innocent until proven guilty on its head. It makes bail impossible for you. Charge sheet can be filed for the investigating agency seeks all of these extensions to file charge sheets. So all sort of safeguards, so-called safeguards that have been put into place as the government justifies it, they are just like processes to be ticked on a paper. They're not in effect, they're not having any effect. For example, like the sanction that Arundhati Roy has, case against Arundhati Roy has got after 14 years. I mean, if any sane person would have just applied their mind, it would not have been done. So what is the use of this safeguard? Right. So all kind of safeguards, all process of law is bypassed at every stage. And, that makes the whole process only without any point, So it's important to understand that how it is, affecting the lives of people forever. I mean, government uses it as a political tool, but, it really creates fear in the minds of citizens, and that is what it is supposed to do. That is exactly what it was enacted for.
Thank you, Safoora. This is really important because it kind of like you highlighted, you went to the core of what the UAPA isn't it? It's not just a law, and it's not, as the government says, to keep people safe, or, you know, it's quite the opposite. We're actually going to talk a little more about it, but I wanted to come back because, like, you know, this event kind of follows what happened with Arundhati. And I was like, we were going through her book a little bit, book Azadi, which members of the Left Book Club read. And I found a sentence on it, which is quite like, you know, chilling considering what is happening. So for our viewers who don't know, after the BJP government came into power, they expanded, like, you know, Mayur was saying, the definition of terrorist to include individuals and not just organizations. And Arundhati Roy, I'm going to read this sentence out, like one sentence. He said, just who, what kind of individuals it means was made clear when in Parliament, Amit Shah, our chilling Home Minister, said, sir, guns do not give rise to terrorism. The root of terrorism is the propaganda that is done to spread it. And if all such individuals are designated as terrorists, I don't think any member of Parliament should have any objections. Several of us felt his cold eyes staring straight at us. Like, following from this, just to, like, you know, again, like, tell our viewers a little bit about what happened. So in June of this year, the Lieutenant Government of Delhi gave the go-ahead to the police to prosecute Roy along with another academic under the UAPA for remarks that were made in a seminar in 2010. We are actually not able to share any of the links now, but when the video is posted on YouTube, I actually have the video, so I'll post it as well for the viewers to see. And in the seminar, Roy is reported to have said that that Kashmir has never been quote unquote an integral part of India. And the case was filed by somebody who was offended by the remark and who was there at the seminar. And this case has been pending with the police, like Safoora said, for 14 years without being pursued. So, you know, but many are also raising the question that why this moment? Like, why did the government use this moment to prosecute Roy? But also, like, you know, usually within like international discourse, you think that targeting individuals like Roy, also there's a certain PR to it, right? They have the power of like international academia and intellectuals behind them. So I want to explore this moment a little bit, and from there kind of continue the conversation with around UAPA. So Mayur, like, going back to you, like, do you think that, like, does the Arundhati case signify a departure or a continuity in your opinion from previous UAPA cases? And, you know, yeah, and what does this moment tell you about India at this moment?
I mean, it's definitely a continuity. I mean, I think maybe as you said, there's kind of a performance element to it, right? In the sense that targeting a high-profile person such as Arundhati Roy, and Arundhati Roy has been kind of the target of many right-wing things. I mean, this is not I think the same speech was the subject of another case last year, right, under the hate speech laws. So they're clearly kind of using, I mean, this is like kind of what the kind of the insidiousness of the idea of terrorism. It's anything, right? What the government says it's anti-it. But no, I mean, like, people have been being arrested for saying stuff, putting up stuff, allegedly saying stuff for a long time. So in that sense, it's a continuation of it. I think what the case highlights, as kind of Safoora alluded to, right, and you alluded to as well, the fact that after 14 years, the government grants sanction to prosecute, which I guess is different. It's still up to the police whether they actually want to go ahead and prosecute, I think. So as far as I know, they haven't actually filed charges, but they still could. And the fact they have permission to do so 14 years after the fact, and then you really think about then what is if for 14 years hell is not broken loose on the Indian Republic, right? And Kashmir is suddenly not free, then what was what was so dangerous about her speech? Right? And this is what people have been saying for a very long time. Like, how is something as simple as speech so threatening to you? But in a sense, it follows patterns. Like it follows patterns, whether confected or real, but people being accused of speech acts, right? So, for example, one of my who's now a close friend, he was accused of putting up a poster in Delhi near Jamia saying establish Khilafat. And with a raised fist, allegedly the poster was crushing the flags of um, of uh, of several countries, including India, right? And so you find that message objectionable. You don't. I mean, the answer is don't read the message, right? Like he denies ever putting up the poster. So clearly the act itself was confected. But let's say he even did it, right? How is this a terrorist act? Right? And the fact, I mean, so the fact that even terrorism doesn't mean anything, or could mean everything, the fact that you designate something as a terrorist act has material consequences, as Safoora said, right? You're put in jail for much longer. You're in isolation within an isolated space. You can't get out bail very easily. You're under the recent amendments, your property can be confiscated. Right. So even though it's a vague term, it has very material acts. So I think Safoora actually put it very, very well. It's a law that's meant to scare people into not speaking, into not associating, and also scare people into kind of forcing people in some kind of boycott, in a sense that people who I know said, oh, someone's been accused of terrorism crime. People don't associate with you anymore. Finding a house is difficult. It's very difficult for your parents to find places. It's just everything becomes that much more contentious. Daily life becomes contentious. And so in a sense, this designation of a speech as something that is that is threatening to somehow the Indian state is something it's part and parcel of the history of this act. It's always been used. If you look at the UAP originally as an act in 1967, it was used to target speech and association, right? It wasn't used to target acts. It was used to target speech and association. So in a sense, it's a continuation of that, whether from the colonial state to the post-colonial one to the present day, it's aimed to target speech and expression.
Thanks, Mayur. I'm just going to continue because you were talking about speech and dissent and people who are being targeted. But Safoora, what in your experience, you were a student leader, and in your experience, what has been the effect of the use of this law on movements on ground? Yeah.
Yeah. First of all, Adrija, as I was saying, that it is an act which basically it's political in nature, and what we see by the targeting of Arundhati Roy and Shaukat Hussain is exactly that. It is supposed to send a certain message to the people. We also know the timing of when this happened. It was right after the elections, right? The election result, and that was a time after 4 years of complete sort of disillusionment. There was there's been complete sort of let's just say, we've all been pretty demotivated, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. The sort of attack we have been facing, especially anybody who says anything again, let alone say anything against the government, criticizes even a government policy or somebody associated with the ruling dispensation, the sort of suppression, the attack from left, right, center they face is it's unbearable. It's not bearable for a human being. And of course, for somebody who's motivated, I mean, as an activist, I'm motivated to speak my mind, and voice my opinions, and that motivation is pretty strong. You need to have a certain level of strong motivation and determination to go there, but it can break that level of determination as well. And I see so many of my fellow activists who are not activists anymore, who don't speak, and I'm not angry at them. I am not disappointed in them. I completely understand it, because I feel the brunt of it. I feel the heat of it, and I'm just like sort of melting. And I mean, so many people around me are sort of short of melting. And that's the kind of situation that we face as of last 4 years. But of course, like, we were trying to do whatever in our power we could do, and at that time, the only possible solution seemed like an electoral change. I mean, Mayur began with saying that, we also began saying that who brought in the UAPA. But sadly, we're at a situation, at a point in time where, we believe that the only thing that can, save this country right now is an electoral change, and everybody has been working towards it. And we saw a slight glimpse of it, with the people's mandate on June 4. And of course, the morale was a bit high. And that is what they don't want. They want people to be in a perpetual state of anxiety, perpetual state of stress, and perpetual state of fear. And that kick that, we sort of people, that hope, that ray of hope that people saw in the process of democracy, I think it was to break that, we're not going anywhere, and we're going to come, like, we are stronger, going to continue to be stronger, and targeting Arundhati Roy, sort of really sends that message loud and clear. So the timing was exactly what it was supposed to do. They might even not even, as Mayur said, they've not filed the charge sheet yet, but they'll keep that sword hanging. It's a power play. It's to show that, we can target anybody. You can have accolades, you can have prizes, you can have international recognition, doesn't matter to us. It's a masochistic flex that, we are going to continue to do what we are going to do. And it is to basically crush the hope that, that people still do have in the process. So that is what it was like, first of all. Secondly, sorry, what was the second part of your question?
Well, I think I have forgotten the second part of my question again. I was so engrossed in listening to you.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I think I'll keep it at that then. Yeah.
No, but I think, you said something really important, like about the moment, but also like about the different layers of silencing. Like, it starts with the top, with the state and the laws, but then it kind of goes into the communities, in your social life, in your everyday, and then it goes to the self. That in the end, like, you're almost like preemptively, like, doing self-surveillance in the fear of what might happen. And I know that I do that all the time, even staying far away and speaking out. So, I can imagine what, like, people on ground, like, it must be.
You asked actually about, like, how it has affected us. How it has affected the space around. I would especially want to talk about how it has affected Jamia, and how it has affected the place that I live in. I live near Jamia, and there's been when COVID kicked in, the protest sites were, brutally, they were demolished, and we were all like, okay, I mean, this is the need of the hour. But suddenly what happened was that, we started receiving lot of students en masse, let me tell you, en masse. So there are 700 witnesses in the Delhi riots conspiracy case, and most of these witnesses, they are, who are they? They are our fellow, they are friends, and all of them, they are their fellow activists, they are friends, they've been comrades, and so imagine how it has ripped your life apart, and suddenly you're left with nobody around you, because the people that you could rely on have now become anybody I mean, around me, I can't even, like, should I go and talk to this person? If I bump into somebody in a market, I'm just thinking, okay, should I talk to this person? I mean, he could be a witness in my case, so there were so many friendships lost, honestly. And that's like, I mean, it's just it might seem like a small thing, but it kind of tears your world apart, because we were really a close bunch in Jamia, and students started receiving these notices from investigating agencies. Like, imagine, like, and students who are aged like 18 to 25, 30 even. And the young, and we were especially worried about the younger students, because they were just doing their bachelor's, or just start wanting to do their masters. And I know so many of my friends who have not been able to continue their education after this. I mean, first of all, they were also so mentally traumatized by the whole process, because this whole process, so imagine how when COVID started. So like it basically started from February of 2020, and it went on at least like till when Umar was arrested. That was September of 2020. So it was like all of these months of total, like 6 months of total witch hunt of every sort of person who's even taken part in an anti-CAA protest anywhere, especially in Delhi, So the amount of people that were called for investigation, interrogation, it is huge. And there were so many tactics that the investigation agency uses: intimidation, I mean, some even went through physical torture. Many of them have not been arrested, but they did go through physical torture during interrogation as well, and they cannot put it behind them. So after that, what happened was, the dissent space in Jamia, which we had really built for over many years, suddenly crashed. What Jamia the issue with Jamia is that we do not have a students' union since a number of years. So the administration has been extremely, overpowering the students, like since many years. But it was very slowly and steadily that we built that space for dissent, which sort of restored sort of like an equilibrium, between the administration and the students. And it was really a beautiful thing. It's something that we really nurtured with, all our time, all our sweat, and, I mean, all of that. And that completely sort of got blown away. So with this example, what I'm trying to say is that this is how, the spaces of dissent, get crushed by use of law. And this is just one part of the crushing process, because there are so many other aspects as well. I mean, like the media trials that are so ruthless and so brutal that they consume your entire life. And apart from that, there's the media trial, but apart from that, there is also the social media. Nothing sort of really disappears from it. Like, if you even search Safoora Zargar today, the kind of garbage that you will find there is going to be there, forever. So I recently went to this wedding. I was invited as a guest, and I think somebody recognized me, and I could actually see people taking out their phones, and they were like, "Oh, she's the one," she.
Oh, I think Safoora's internet is frozen. Safoora, can you hear us? Okay. I think we have about like 5-6 minutes left. While we wait for Safoora to come back, Mayur, shall we just continue the conversation? And I think, what Safoora said, it was very small, but I think that's like, is that the destruction of community, the destruction of friendship, and kind of isolating the individual, like, from everything, is at the core of laws like this. But I wanted to come to the now for a bit, and like, we know that very recently we have a new new sets of criminal law which have come in, criminal codes which have been ushered into India, and actually they have been done in the name of decolonization, to say that, well, we had all these colonial laws and we're going to get rid of them and come up with our own indigenous system. But people have also said that in many ways, like, it's almost like it can be used to target further, like intellectuals and academics. So, and we have about like 6-7 minutes. So I just wanted to, if you could comment on like the new law, the new legal codes and its implications a little bit, and then we'll go back to Safoora again.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think the decolonization talk, at least from the government, is a way of expanding, for example, state power. It's not about restoring some kind of golden age of Indian law or something like that. It's just purely about expanding. I think one of the things about the new laws, so it includes a provision of terrorism. But like people have said, it's not so much is an issue with the content, obviously, because most of the laws have been effectively cut and paste from the previous statutes, right? So that's not the issue. The issue is how kind of the logic of the securitization logic of the UAPA kind of infiltrates into ordinary law, for lack of a better word, right? So, for example, the why under the UAPA you can be in pretrial detention for up to 30 days, or in police custody for up to 30 days, and up to in pre-trial custody for 180 days, right? And then after that, bail is impossible, right? And the stated logic by the state is that these cases are so difficult to prosecute. They involve lots of hidden conspiracies, etc., etc. And it's so dangerous that we can't let these people out. The mere allegation is enough for us to keep them in, right? And it's that logic that's kind of seeped into the ordinary law, right? So I think the titles of the act are quite revealing. I think one is Bharatiya Nagarik Suraksha Sanhita, right? That is the Safety of People Act, right? It's not so much the Indian Penal Code, but it's about the safety of the people. And if you think criminal law is about punishing people, then there's a slightly different logic for crimes that you've committed. There's a slightly different logic to it, right? The logic over here is to protect people. Then anything can be done in the name of what's protecting the people, right? And this comes in very concrete ways. For example, under the new acts, you can be in custody for up to 90 days, and so that it's and that the logic is of protection of the people comes from this idea of security, right? You need to protect everything. Everything's anticipating of like some sort of like disastrous thing that'll happen. And that's the logic of the UAPA, if there is one, and that's certainly the logic of the new laws as well.
Brilliant. Thank you, Mayur. And we also, Peace in India has put together a little booklet on UAPA and the new laws, which we will share when we share the video on YouTube as well. So if you want to like read a little bit more about it, there are links and resources within that as well. But we have like the last few minutes, and I'm going to go to Safoora with our last question to kind of say where do we go from here, and so just what are the imaginations and the spaces of solidarity in the context that we are in. But also the second part of the question, which I will remember this time, is that we are having this conversation with viewers in the UK, and what can we do to show solidarity, not only to you but also to the people who are still being targeted, who are still incarcerated and in prison.
Right, Adrija. Honestly, it is expected to sort of end on a positive note. But I mean, of course, I mean, I would also want to end on a positive note, but right now the situation, I think, demands otherwise. It is just so important to highlight right now that, everything is not going to fix itself. I mean, we are much beyond that point. Honestly, we've also been trying to figure out since the last, I mean, we feel so helpless. I mean, for example, look at this, that, it's been 2 years that, 12 of our co-accused applied for bail in the High Court, the bail hearings are so lengthy that, they take about six months for these people. And when that time comes, the orders are reserved, the bench is changed, the roster is changed, and the bench is changed. So the new bench comes and says, okay, now let's do all the arguments again. Okay. And then again, it takes 6 months to do all the arguments. And then again, it's like the bench changes. Then again, it takes 6 months to do the arguments. And this has happened 3 times now. So basically, if you want to deny bail, like do it, let it be seen as it is, let it be recorded, let it be documented as part of history that, this happened actually. But they neither deny the bail, neither do they give bail. And this is like a constant process of punishment that, people in the Bhima Goregaon case and, people in the Delhi Raj conspiracy case have been, they've been undergoing since past so many years. It is so important, as, I always appeal to the international community to continue to keep talking about it, Of course, this many would say that it's not working, it does not, work, but I think we do not have any other option. We've also been trying to figure out since the past 3-4 years that, what is the right way to fight this battle. But I think there is only one way. We don't know whether it's right or wrong, but the only way is to continue to do what they don't want us to do, which is continue to keep dissenting, continue to keep criticizing, continuing to keep speaking truth to power. That's there are so many of my friends and so many people I know who are, everybody's scared. I'm scared, I feel a lot of fear, every time I say yes to, speaking at a program or participating in a discussion, I'm not without fear, I honestly, I don't sleep peacefully at all. Like there's this constant thought nagging into my head that, Safoora, these are the words that you're not supposed to use. These are the words that you're not supposed to say. And this is how you're supposed to say it. And so you're constantly trying to gag yourself and censor yourself. And it's reached to a level where I find that I'm actually trying to censor my thoughts as well, thoughts which are so private to me. Me sitting in and thinking about something, and I'll be like, "Oh, Safoora, don't think about it." So that sort of like it's reached to that level in the country, and for me, it is very, very important to highlight this situation that how it is affecting mentally also so many people in the country. Of course, physically, like all of the people who continue to speak against the government policies that they do not agree with, they do so in a constant state of fear, and they still continue to do so. So it is very important to highlight that what this means, this process of where you're so scared, but you still continue to be scared and continue to do this. And even after doing this, you are so scared because God knows after 14 years, somebody will come and prosecute you under UIPM. That's the sort of situation that we are in. So it's so important to sort of really highlight that. But at the same time, it is very, very important to continue speaking up wherever we are.
Yeah. Thank you, Safoora. I think that is a really positive note to end on, that we need to keep dissenting, keep speaking out. And, the governments and states across the world, they are meeting, they're exchanging notes. Like, the right-wing government in UK was just defeated in a recent general election, and there's a new Labour government who's come into power. But then Keir Starmer's, one of the first things that he did when coming into power was to overturn the Kashmir statement. He has openly shown support for Modi. People in his cabinet like David Lammy, even before Modi was announced as the new prime minister, went on congratulating and looking forward to working with the Indian state. So we know that they're working together, they're exchanging notes. So I think we also need to keep these conversations going transnationally, and for us to all use our voices collectively and our resources collectively to speak out against what is happening, and connect these like transnational struggles everywhere. So I think with Peace in India as well, like throughout this year, we're going to try and have like different conversations and workshops and transnational and intergenerational conversations on resisting policing and militarization across the world. So please follow us on social media if you want to contribute. unfortunately can't take any questions, but I've seen that there is a question. And maybe that's for us to think about, is that would a BDS style campaign be helpful in the context of India? So maybe it's also for us to think about like how to kind of then, as people in the diaspora, to take the things forward and dwell on the things that you have also told us today. Thank you so much. We know that it's literally the middle of the night in India. And so thank you so much for taking out time and joining us today. And thank you, Mayur, as well. You both have childcare, needs. So we are specifically honored that you've given us your time and to have this conversation. Thank you, Left Book Club, again for hosting this discussion. Please follow Left Book Club and Peace in India both on social media. And thank you very much and good night.